Probably gonna train. Oh,
Hi.
Hello, everybody. So thank you guys so much for coming to the live show for the Once Upon a Read Along Book of the Month discussion for July. As always, it is me and Chloe from the Brunette Bibliophile. Say hi.
Hi.
And then me and Chloe, we decided to do something different for the rest of, I don't know, forever until we feel like stopping doing this. Who knows?
Forever.
We're going to have a special guest every single month join us to kind of give us their insight on the books that we're discussing. And so this month, joining us to talk about Bad Romance by Heather Demetrios is Trina from Between Chapters.
Hi.
Hey, so thank you so much to Trina for joining us to talk about Bad Romance. I'm really, really excited about it. So I guess we will go ahead and get started. If anyone is joining us who have not joined us in the past, the first 5 or so minutes are non-spoilery. We will talk about our initial thoughts, what we rated it, if we use star ratings, and it'll be non-spoilery. And then after that, we're going to go into all of the spoilery discussions. So if you have not read Bad Romance, definitely go and give it a read and come back and watch the live show at another time. But if you have read it or you are cool with spoilers, then thank you for joining us for the whole thing. So I'll go ahead and get started since I'm already talking. I gave Bad Romance a 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed it when it comes to contemporary reads because they're not my absolute favorite, but I thought this was a great book. I thought it was very well written, although it was dense and extremely hard to get through because there's like a lot of words. I don't know how else to explain it. It was just like I would read for 30 minutes, but it would feel like I was reading for like an hour. It was crazy. Never read a book that was like written kind of like that. But I did really like it, and I enjoyed reading it. So, Trina, do you want to go next, our special guest?
Yeah, I was really excited about this book from the moment that I heard about it because I knew it was going to talk about an abusive relationship. I've been pretty open on my channel, but just in case anyone watching this isn't familiar with me, I've lived through an abusive relationship in my past when I was younger. So I haven't read many books about it, and this book, I don't really know what I would rate it because there are some things I think that it did maybe wrong, but it also had such a personal meaning to me. It probably is 5 stars in terms of personal enjoyment. And like you said, I had a hard time reading it because like I wanted to keep reading, and it would feel like I'd read for hours, but I'd only read a few chapters, and then I had to just stop because it got really intense. Like, as someone who's been through something similar, it reflected a lot of things I'd been through, and I was like, I have to take a break because I'm getting like way too into this. Like, it sucks you in.
Yeah, and it's crazy that you say that because I have never been in an abusive relationship, and it was like really intense for me as well. So just an intense book all around, definitely. Chloe, what did you think? What did you rate it?
All right. So I actually finished this book yesterday because it just took, like, it, as everybody else said, it's taken so long to get through. And it's not that it's a bad book because I gave it 3.5 stars. It's good, and when you really get into it, then it's great. But it's the sitting there and feeling like you're reading forever. And Elizabeth knows because I was texting her every time this was happening, and then only reading like 10 pages. And for me, it got to a point where it was Friday night. I only had like 30 pages left, and I just could not keep reading because it felt like I'd been reading for so long. But the story isn't bad. I did enjoy the story as a contemporary lover, and this was my first Heather Demetrios book, and I gave it 3.5 stars.
I do also want to jump in for anyone thinking about picking the book up. Huge like trigger warning for suicide and suicidal ideation and rape. But the suicide aspect, I think, is very realistic in terms of what these two characters were going through, and mental illness being part of some abusive relationships and abusers and victims is very realistic. But I do think parts of that were written in a way that get you into their mindset so much that could, be something some readers would want to steer away from.
Yeah, definitely. I know I mentioned that in my wrap-up video. This, like, if you are triggered by abusive content at all, that's like the whole book is about this abusive relationship, arguably 2 abusive relationships that this main character is in. So, you know.
Yeah, there's also parental abuse, and I don't know if I mentioned this just a minute ago, but there's a rape as well, and just a lot of really heavy topics. So be prepared for that one going in, and be sure you can handle that.
Yes. I did forget to mention, I almost went into this book blind. I remember when we were picking this book, I briefly looked at the synopsis and the other synopsize of the other books that we were picking from. And when I was going into this book, when I picked it up a couple of weeks ago, the only thing I knew about it, and up until the point when I was mentioning that in my videos, the only thing I knew was that it's about a girl with a bad home life. I didn't know any of the other stuff that went down in this book until I read it.
Yeah. Okay. So for anyone who is joining us, sorry, I usually try to warn people that we're probably going to get into like the spoilery section now that we've talked about our initial thoughts. So just a warning to anyone if you don't want all of the spoilers. Those are really good for trigger warnings. Those are not spoilers at all. So I'm glad that you mentioned that, Trina, before I steered people away from the spoilers. But if anyone wants to leave now for the spoilers, now would be the time to do so. What was that, Chloe? Sorry.
Before we do get started, I'm following the Twitter and I'm looking at the chat. So if you have any questions, comments, anything like that, you can tweet us at OnceReadAlong, or you can comment in the chat because I'm manning both of them.
Awesome. I always forget about the chat. I don't know how I do that. Chloe's like, oh, I'm looking at the chat, and someone commented, and I was like, oh yeah, there's a chat on these live shows. I forgot.
I feel like we should point out, like, if you also have questions, tweet us, because what else? I just hit my dog. I'm sorry, TJ. I didn't know you were under my desk.
So since you mentioned, Trina, I knew that you had talked about that you have been in an abusive relationship in the past on your channel, but I didn't want to say anything in case you didn't want to talk about it here. But you believe that the way that the abusive relationship was portrayed, it was not, I mean, obviously there's trigger warnings and stuff, but you don't believe that it was problematic? You don't believe that?
I don't think that this was a problematic portrayal, but going along with that, this is one instance of one relationship, and it's not going to mirror everything that everyone out there has experienced. It doesn't mirror what I've experienced 100%, but in a lot of ways, it dealt with a lot of things I had experienced that I had never read about in a YA book before, in any book before. So I definitely think that it was accurate. It deals with a lot of problematic things, but to me, it didn't come off in a problematic way. And that could very well be because of the insight that I myself brought into the book. Mm-hmm. And I was able to examine some things beyond just the words that were on the page. But I do know other people, like on Goodreads, I have had interactions with or seen reviews of, who have also been through abusive relationships. They really didn't like it. They thought, you know, the book went too far with some things. And, you know, everyone's opinion on that is valid if they've been through it. Yeah. And something that really stuck out to me is the author's note. I did not know this going in, and I kind of wish I had. But Heather Demetrios was writing this from a place of experience. And so obviously it's not 100% her experience, and she can't represent everyone out there, but just having a book from someone knowing that they'd been through it, it just made it feel very genuine to me. And I think she always presents the things that are bad as bad in a bad light. None of this is being romanticized. None of it's being brushed aside, you know, in my opinion.
Oh, sorry, Chloe, go ahead.
I actually had a question for you, Trina. Can you compare it to a book that that maybe represents abusive relationships in a bad way? Because the only other one that I've read is It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. So
I haven't read that one. So since you mentioned Colleen Hoover, the only thing that I can think of is, I mean, I think in general, a lot of times abusive behaviors in romances are kind of romanticized and never addressed. And one that came to my mind was Slammed by Colleen Hoover. I feel like that relationship has a power imbalance. There are a few times where the guy actively manipulates the girl into doing something he wants when she doesn't want to. There's just instances of manipulation and stuff that goes unaddressed and is portrayed as being romantic. And they are reasons why she wants to be with him. And, you know, the reader is supposed to take that in and ship them together. Right. So, you know, that's where it can run into problematic territory for me. Because in this book, from page one, you know it's an abusive relationship. You're never shipping these people. You always want them to break up, you know? Yeah. You're always very well aware of what the problems are. Oh, and I love the format, how it's like Grace writing to Gavin after they've broken up, because that allowed her to show us how their story evolved and how she fell for him and went along with his behaviors, even willingly, or what she thought was willingly. But then her hindsight allows her to point out, now I know better. Now I know that this was you manipulating me. And so I just love the insight that allowed, because it let you see how it unfolded and then also called it out right that minute, you know?
I did think it was interesting that she wrote it, because I've never read a book in second point of view before. So I did think that was interesting going into it.
Yeah, I really like that she was kind of like talking to him as well. That was definitely something that I wanted to talk about. But oh my God, I had something. There was something that I wanted to talk about more related to this side of it. But I had something else that I guess I could talk about until I remember that. But I really liked the like musical theater and the music, all that stuff that had it. Like I just thought that the bad romance thing was kind of like a coincidence for some reason. I don't know. Maybe I should have connected the dots. But I thought it was really cool because the book starts out with a quote from Bad Romance by Lady Gaga, and that really kind of showed you who the main character was, that she's got a really big love of music and theater, and I thought that was really, really interesting, and I really appreciated that part because I just felt like it made her more relatable and more real, and I really liked that.
I noticed that the music element was more prominent in the beginning of the story than it was as we got towards the middle and then the end, and then like right at the very end is when it picked back up again.
Yeah, I can see. I was noticing that as I was reading the book, and maybe it's some kind of like, I don't know, AP English word that I can't think of, you know, to represent the struggles that she's going through and disconnecting from herself. You know what I mean?
I definitely think that was the case. I think it was meant to reflect that Grace was a character that, you know, she had her own hobbies and interests, and she kind of let go of those as the relationship carried on. And you can see Gavin's influence on not liking the hobbies and interests that she had. And then she gains them back when she starts gaining, you know, a realization of what's going on.
Yeah. Because when I was reading, I remember, Elizabeth, you started it before me. And you were like, there's so many music references. I love it. And I'm getting to like the middle and stuff. I'm like, where are all these music references? Elizabeth, did you lie to me? Like,
no,
what is this?
I was probably reading the beginning when there was a lot of musical references. I swear I didn't lie. But I remembered what I wanted to talk about before. Her best friends were really, I loved that they were always like, dude, break up with him. What are you doing? Like, they never, I mean, like, in the beginning of their relationship, before anyone knew who he really was, his true colors, obviously they were like, yeah, you guys would be so cute together. But then once everyone realized, like, this guy is bad news, they were like, you need to break up with him, and we will support you, and we will be there for you if you do it, and when you do it, and you need to do it. And, like, I loved her two best friends. Or three?
Two.
Okay, I couldn't remember if it was like three altogether or there were three best friends. My memory again is.
There's kind of a third one towards the end.
The boy.
Yeah. Can we talk about Gideon for a second? Because I was like hardcore shipping them.
Yes, no, I loved Gideon, and I wanted them to be together in the end, but I liked that they weren't.
It made sense that they weren't.
Yeah.
When she first started crushing on Gideon, my initial thought was, oh no, I really don't want the book to go down the route of another boy saves her, you know, from the problems in her life. And so I was really glad that that wasn't the case in the end with this book, how, you know, that did give her a reason to re-examine and, like, you know, a comparison of like, okay, well, this is what a guy could be like. And now I'm seeing that my relationship isn't really as great as I've always thought it was. But I'm really glad that she didn't just like dump Gavin to get with Gideon and everything was like, I'm saved now, you know.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a good point. I didn't think about it that way, but yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I'm really glad that she wasn't with him in the end. I mean, in my head, they're together now, and and
I mean, I really liked him, and I was shipping him too, because I mean, he was a great character. But I appreciated more for the, you know, the revelations that he let her have But yeah, maybe in the future they'll get together. That'd be great. But I'm just glad it didn't end right there.
A short story sequel here.
Right? Yes, I need it in my life. A happy ending for both of them. So I don't know if this is going to go anywhere conversationally wise, but I wanted to mention that there were like a couple of lines in there that just were like scenes that made me so sad. Literally, I wanted to cry. I'm not a big crier when it comes to books, but there was one line, I tweeted it, and Heather Demetrios commented back to me, and it was the line where she says she never writes in her diary again. And when I was younger, like writing in my diary was such a big part of my life. And so like the fact that he just ripped that away from her was just so sad. And then the other one was when he told her not to go to the college that she wanted to go to in New York. Like, oh my God. I was just like at that point when he was, because education is very important to me. I wanted to be a teacher my entire life. I'm a tutor, for a job sometimes, not as much right now. But anyway, education is very important to me in the end. And for her to decide not to go to her dream college for this guy, I was screaming in my head at her to be like, stop, what are you doing? Like, oh, it just made me so frustrated.
Yeah.
That scene was one of the most impactful to me because it was so like intense and it was very hard to read. And while it was hard to read and going into it that, she shouldn't give up her dream school, I related to all of her thought processes in that moment so hardcore. Like when you are in a relationship like that and you love the person, even when you see their flaws or whatever, an abuser a lot of times will tear you down like he did with Grace. He called her a slut. He, kept saying she was cheating on him and all these horrible things. And she starts to believe those things about herself. And then he's the one that's there to pick up the pieces and tell her he loves her and he's the only one that will ever keep her safe. And so she has this internal struggle of all these bad things about me are true. He's the only one that loves me and accepts me for who I am. So I do want to be with him. Of course, I'll give this up for him. And it's like I could just totally relate to how torn she was and ultimately how she gave into that decision. But it was so hard to read that. Like I was like, don't do it. Please don't. That's one of the most heartbreaking scenes I think I've ever read in a book.
Yeah, and it really sucks because like she can write in her diary again, like maybe one day. Oh, sorry, I didn't know if someone was talking. Okay, so she can recover one day and she can write in her diary again and feel safe in a new relationship or by herself or whatever. Writing in her diary again one day, hopefully. But once you give up that, you don't even apply to that college, it's going to be like 10 times harder to get in that college like next year or something like that. So it's just, it's just like he ruined her future for her dream college in that one moment. Like one conversation was all it took to crush her dreams. And it just made me so sad. And I'm sure there are like a bunch of other scenes, but those two are ones that really stuck out to me because I could relate to them.
Stepping away from the romantic relationship and into more of the parental relationship.
Oh yeah.
Her mother, and because I was rooting for her at some point, I was very frustrated when she would be, this type of person that's like, do this, do that, blah, 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 almost in like a dictator fashion. And then be like the sweet, caring mother for like a scene and then go back like nothing ever happened. And it was very frustrating because when she was the sweet and caring mother, I was rooting for her to like change her ways or something, and then nothing happened.
Yeah, I'm sure it's hard when you have like the influence, like her husband, the mom's husband in her life that kind of like, I don't know. I don't want to say like he makes her do those things, but obviously he's influenced her because you can tell from, the main character, Grace, when Grace, talks about her past with her older sister and her mother and how her mother was different back then and how she is now. It's like, obviously this guy has had an influence on her life and a very, very negative one. And you know, it sucks when they're just by themselves, Grace and her mom, how she's one person, and then when she's home, she's a different person. And then we get that glimpse of OCD, which was like really insightful, because at first you think that she's literally just doing this to be conniving, like clean everything. That's not clean enough. You didn't do this. You didn't do that. I just thought in the beginning that, you know, that all she wanted was Grace to stay home and clean for whatever reason. But really, there's underlying OCD there, which I thought was like really interesting. And I kind of wish I would have had more of that. I think it would have helped me understand her mother a little bit more. But then again, I think that might have been too much for the book to handle. You know what I mean?
I would have liked to see more in the mom's storyline, because it's very interesting how her mom and her stepdad are like, you know, she's internalized a lot of what she sees with them, and that helps lead her into this bad situation. And yet, as bad as she sees her mom's marriage as, she never recognizes it's the same thing that she's dealing with. And that was very interesting. And, you know, I was definitely hoping that she would make her mom realize this is an abusive marriage, you need to get out. And then like the two of them would somehow like band together and escape both of these horrible men. So yeah, I wish more had been done there. I don't know. There's that scene when her mom slapped her. And I think that, you know, obviously that one was shown as bad, and everyone was like, and that's kind of like the reverse, where then Gavin I don't know. Okay, I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. Pregnancy brain.
Because Gavin was there and he like saved the day.
He also recognized that, you know, that was child abuse, and yet he again can't recognize it in himself or something like that. But you know, I wish that the parents, both her and his parents, were kind of more a part of the story.
Yeah, I agree. Especially his parents. Like, I wish that his parents had done more. Like, I don't know if Gavin just typical abuser probably has a good way of hiding what they're doing. I don't know, but I feel like maybe his parents should have recognized more of what he was doing. Like, something happened in his previous relationship, and now that his current relationship, the same things are kind of happening. Like, maybe there's a pattern there. And it's
like there was that scene at the very end where it said his mom found Grace's breakup letter and said, I wish you had told us that, you know, y'all were fighting and you weren't happy. But I really wish that Grace had gone to his parents. Like, there's all that talk near the end where she's like, you need to see therapy. You need to get medication for your depression and for your suicidal thoughts and everything. And he does go into therapy. He does go into that rehab center. But never once did she say, I'm going to have his parents make sure, you know, he does actually follow through and get this help. And considering she had such a good relationship with his parents, you know, that was kind of something I was disappointed we didn't see, because, you know, but I mean, maybe then we wouldn't have had as long of a story.
Yeah, it's like, you know, it sucks. That's like the YA trope with like the missing parents. Like, parents are a vital part of a teenager's life, but are we going to have the same story if the parents are super involved?
Yeah.
So it's like, I'm annoyed with that trope sometimes, but then I have to understand, like, from an author's perspective, can they write a good story if the parents are super involved? No, not this type of story. You know what I mean? Definitely not like a teenager saves the world type story, you know? So it's like, you have to look at both sides of the author's point of view, and, you know.
And I would have loved more of a way to examine where Gavin learned his behaviors, because a lot of time it's the abusers that are the ones that learn behaviors from the relationships that they see, and they think, well, this is okay, this is how you're supposed to treat your partner. But his parents, what we saw of them, they seemed, you know, very healthy and happy relationship. And so it is kind of weird. I mean, obviously not everyone has to have like a concrete reason, and it very well could have been, like they said, that he was codependent and something, they mentioned something else in terms of his mental illness besides just depression. But, you know, it very well could have been that. That's something else. Part of what I didn't love so much about this book was in terms of Gavin and her mom, I think pretty flippant language about mental illness is used. Like, there's an awareness that this is a real mental illness. You need medication, you need therapy, which is all healthy discussions, especially in YA books. But a lot of times too, like, her friends would just say, he's insane, he's psychotic, he's psycho, he's crazy.
Yeah.
And like, you know, painting those words as synonymous with abusive or evil, you know, but again, they're teenagers. So, and some of that can go along with a story like this. So I don't really know how I feel about that, but that is something present.
Yeah, and I've heard that argument a lot with some type of books where if it's dealing with mental illness, that is problematic, using words like crazy and insane and stuff like that. And you know, I have a mental disorder. I have bipolar disorder, and you know, when I was 12, when I got diagnosed with that, you know, I heard someone say bipolar disorder, and I'm just like, I'm not crazy. Like, so, you know, it sucks because you know, as a younger person, you could be ignorant to that, but you grow up and you learn. And so I see what you're saying, that like they're still teenagers and they might not be completely aware that saying those words is extremely problematic. You know, but it is nice to point out for anyone who is watching, who hasn't read it, that, you know, those words are said and it definitely can be problematic. And
I think the book does a pretty good job at calling out the language used. Like there's a couple scenes at the beginning where her two friends, one of them will call another girl fat or slutty, and then the other one immediately is like, that's not okay. You can't call other girls that. And so I think there were one or two instances where they said the same thing when they called him a psycho, and someone was like, hey, you know, hold on, you need a diagnosis or something like that. But, you know, that kind of language, since there is so much abuse and mental illness, it was kind of flying around pretty often.
Yeah, definitely.
I know we kind of moved from parents to the relationship, but going back to the parents, yeah, well, I have a comment as far as like parents is concerned, and then there's stuff in the chat. But I remember I started this book before Booktubeathon and then put it down for that. But over Booktubeathon, I read Geekerella, and that, you know, that's a Cinderella retelling, and I kept thinking the moms are so similar, like they have such similar home situations in this almost between those two books, to a point where I was thinking, well, wait, didn't this happen? No, that was the other book at some point.
I haven't read that, so I don't know.
And then in the chat, Desiree from Libri Labra says, honestly, I think part of parenting is letting your kids make mistakes, and that can occasionally mean pretending you didn't see/know something.
Well, I see where you're coming from. If it's like something like abusing their significant other, maybe,
or trying to kill themselves multiple times.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, they clearly knew he had some kind of trouble, and yeah, I do think they could have stepped in a little bit more, been utilized in terms of storytelling. But yeah, I do agree. Part of parenting is letting your kids make their own mistakes, but not when it's gonna kill somebody.
Yeah, or really harm somebody else or hurt themselves. Yeah. What else was the chat saying, Chloe?
Going back to, this was another comment from same person, and it's the last comment. Going back to how there's the trope of parents not really being in the stories as much. She said maybe they should write those stories with parents in the picture.
Yeah, I mean, like, I have to think, like, how exciting of a story would that be? I don't know. But then again, I've read, like, some books, like H2O by Virginia Bergen is about, like, this rain that, like, one drop can kill you. Fantastic book. And parents were very much in that story. And it was really good. So I don't know. If you're a really talented writer, maybe you could pull it off. But sometimes you just can't. I don't know.
I think in Grace's situation, it made a lot of sense of why she didn't have that parental support. And then maybe Gavin, just because he was a secondary character, we just didn't get as in-depth of a look into his home life.
Yeah, maybe. That's definitely a possibility.
But yeah, it's definitely like the double-edged sword. We need more parents, but then if we do, would we have the same story ability?
Yeah, it's hard. Like, I like, that's one of my, like, favorite tropes that I love to hate, kind of, because of that, like, double-edged sword thing. It's so, like, I have to always ask myself, like, I find myself thinking a lot, where the heck are these kids' parents? And I'm like, okay, Elizabeth, calm down. It wouldn't be exciting if the parents were in the story as exciting most of the time. So, yeah. Oh, YA tropes. I can't think of anything. I feel like I had a lot more to say. Like, I feel like we've like discussed a lot of stuff, you guys. High five. Was there anything else specifically that you guys wanted to mention? I'm trying to think. I mean, we really didn't talk a lot. I really liked the musical theater stuff, like that they're doing, you know, plays, and that was a big part of her life. And if anyone is a really big fan of theater and plays, I think that you would really enjoy this book if you're not triggered by you know, abusive situations. It was really cool that it was such a big part of the story, and I liked that she had such a really cool hobby.
I was in drama class in high school, and I was in stage crew and the sound engineer. So I wasn't actually acting. I was like, oh my gosh, Grace is my high school self. This is too relatable, too intense.
That is crazy. If you don't mind me asking, how old were you when you were in this?
Well, I wasn't in high school, but let me see. What was I? I don't remember at this point. I think it was my second year of college. So like maybe 20, probably 19. I think it was 19. And it was something that jealousy was a huge aspect of. Not allowed to hang out with my friends, not allowed to talk to other boys, being blamed for a lot of things, being put down, and then them being the one I could, you know, the shoulder I could cry on, and that kind of stuff. And it was definitely a situation where they had learned it. He had learned it from his father. And some other stuff. But the thing is because I was kind of so cut off from my friends, I didn't have any friends, and I was in college away from my family. I didn't have any friends. I had friends. I didn't have any friends that were calling that out to me until way after that was already ended. And then I had a conversation with somebody on Goodreads about this. But once you're in a relationship like that, it can really stay with you. You can really internalize things and think that those things are normal. And so I did have another pretty manipulative relationship afterwards, because I just thought some of those things, that's just how relationships are supposed to be. Everyone's jealous. Of course they'd be jealous or whatever.
Yeah. And so the one thing that was really crazy with his jealousy, like I feel like we didn't see it as much as, like, I've heard of real life abusive relationships where jealousy is like huge. Like you can't even talk to a guy and you can't have any friends and anything like that. And I feel like his was kind of toned down for the story so that she did have that ability to have that friend connection, and her friends could like talk to her and be like, you need to break up with this guy.
I thought it was pretty strong in the story in comparison to other books that I've read. Like there was a lot of time spent on the jealous aspect, and even though she did still see her friends, she always had to fight to see them. He did really try to cut her off. And something else that we haven't talked about that just came into my head was, I love that this book didn't portray a physically abusive, like in terms of hitting or punching someone across the face. Like I know there was a rape scene, which is physical abuse, obviously. But sex is something that can be really tied up in weird ways in a relationship like that. And I think there was one moment where he kind of grabbed her too hard and it left a bruise. You know, but things like that, I'm really glad that this book dealt with, because it's obviously not like he's punching her across the face and throwing her down the stairs, which are very stereotypical portrayals of, you know, what.
And I've heard, you know, from people that I know personally who've been in abusive relationships, that like, if, you know, it's really easy to kind of like, for yourself, if you're in that kind of relationship, I would assume that it would be easy to brush it off, like, oh, at least he's not hitting me, or he would never hurt me.
Yeah, see, mine was there was never any physical, any kind of hitting or anything like that. And the whole time that I was in it, I had no idea. It was only like a year later when one of my friends was like, you know, I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And I kept waiting for the physical abuse to happen because I thought that's what was going to happen.
I mean, I assumed it would too, because so many books go that route, but it meant a lot to me to see that it didn't have to still get that point across that, you know, you don't have to be punished for it to be an abusive relationship.
Yeah. And something that made me really sad about the abuse getting physical there at the end when there was that rape scene is like afterwards when she was taking a shower, because if anyone, I was sexually abused when I was young, and I know that nothing came about until months later. And of course, the physical evidence and being able to prove anything is like basically gone if you take a shower or something like that. And it was just like, I wanted her so badly to just go and tell somebody so that he can get his ass arrested. And I'm sorry, I try not to cuss on my channel, but it frustrated me so much because after that happened, it just like, you know, I don't know. Sexual abuse is something that I have experienced. I got really like hot. I'm sorry. So it's like that. It really fires me up because I've been there and it's like, it sucks. And I just really wanted her to say something to somebody, and I wanted that to happen. And I'm really sad that that didn't, I guess.
It would have been great if that was her like final straw. I'm going to the police. This will be your undoing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I always, every time I read about someone, you know, being sexually abused, it took me over a month for me to say anything to anybody. And so, you know, the fact, every time I read about someone being sexually abused, I just want them so badly to just say something to somebody, like, immediately or as soon as they can, because, you know, I wasn't able to do that for myself. And so it was just so frustrating that I just really wanted her to be able to do that, and it sucked. Like, I felt her so much in that moment. That was the most relatable thing for me because I've been there. So,
and it's really interesting that this book chose to portray that within a consensual relationship. Like, this was where the abuser was someone she was willingly in a relationship with, even though that scene was not consensual. You know, and so many times, I know we're finally kind of breaking out of this stereotype, but so many times people think a rapist is just some guy that broke out of jail and is going to break in your bedroom window one night that you have never met. And so many more times it's actually someone you know or are dating.
Yes, and it's so interesting that you say that because I saw a news article that people on Twitter in the booktube community are actually talking about, that this woman is, I don't know if she's like, she went to the police or something, but basically she was like, my husband, she found out on her husband's phone that he sexually assaulted her or abused her in her sleep. And there's like, people screenshotted all these comments of like, how does your husband sexually abuse you? Or how can someone sleep through that? And it's just like, oh my God, it's so frustrating. Like, just because you were in a relationship with somebody doesn't mean that they can't sexually abuse you. Oh, I get so fired up about that one too.
Yeah, marital rape is a thing that there are laws against, so.
And there's laws that protect it too. Like, some states, they're like, well, you can't say no to your husband, sorry. You got married to him, doesn't matter if you don't want to have sex with him or not.
Yeah.
I hate that. It's that's like literally the worst. Ugh. It just makes me feel all icky, and I just like, oh, I hate it. Okay, sorry. Anyway, was there anything else? I can't think of, I don't know. Anything else you wanted to point out? I'm trying to think if there was any other plot points that I really wanted to mention. I feel like after the live show, I'm going to have a lot to talk about because there's so much going on in this story.
There's one more comment in the chat that says the To All the Boys I've Loved Before books by Jenny Han, they have strong family elements. And then there's one more comment that just came in. And it's
strong family elements, strong family abuse?
Or sorry, strong family. It just says strong family story. So I'm not sure if it.
No, like when we were talking about how we wish parents were more involved. Yeah, that series definitely has a great family aspect, and I think it really works with that one because it's really a family-centric book about, you know, her relationship with her sisters and how that influences herself. You know.
Yeah, I see that. I didn't connect the dots for a second there. Sorry. What was the other one?
The last one is from Desiree, and she wants to know what each of us rated it. I gave it a 3.5.
And I gave it a 4, and I think Trina said a 5 maybe, right?
Yeah, it's probably a 5-star for personal meaning and enjoyment, although I recognize it's not a perfect book.
Yeah, it's hard with a book like this because so many people have so many different experiences, and, you know, some people can really relate to it, and some people think that it's completely unrelatable. So
I just like reading this book was so powerful, And like, I mean, I wish I had had it because I didn't have the friends and the family telling me this is wrong, this is what you should do. I wish I'd had it when I was younger. And I cannot think of, like, even my favorite books of this year, I feel like this one just had more of an impact on me. And like when I was reading it, I was like, oh my gosh, like on every page.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that's probably worth 5 stars from me.
Yeah, definitely. And since you mentioned to All the Boys I Loved Before with the relationship with their sister, that made me think of Grace's relationship with her sister in this book that I think maybe we can talk about for a little bit to make the live show a little bit longer. But I thought that was really cool. I think it was really cool because it gave like Grace someone to kind of look up to who kind of escaped, you know, at least her familial abuse that they were experiencing. And I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, and that's another instance where I wish she had gone to Gavin's parents about him. I wish she had gone to her sister about, you know, anything, her relationship, the parents. And it's like, man, I bet her sister could have really helped her out. But I'm so happy in the end that, you know, they did reconnect and they're going to be there for each other and stuff. I wonder if her little brother, how he's going to be affected in that home.
Oh, that makes me so sad because like, it makes me sad because like I have a little brother. I was 15 when he was born. So like there is a big gap there, and like I could relate to her and how much she loved her little brother so much because like my little brother is like my entire world. Like he is my everything and I love him to death, and I could relate to that on a really personal level. And I really hope that he doesn't turn out like his dad.
I know.
Do we know how old he was in the book?
I think he was like 3, wasn't he? He's
That's
pretty
what
young.
I thought.
I don't know why I want to say 6. I don't know why.
No, they're still pretty young.
Yeah. Yeah, because he couldn't say words. I remember he couldn't say people's names correctly. So yeah, 3 sounds about right. When you're still developing your speech and stuff.
And that's a pretty realistic portrayal too. Like he's the reason the mom is staying with her jerk husband. He's the reason that Grace is staying in the home with those terrible parents, you know. Like there's always a reason.
Yeah, there's always some way that, you know, people will make it okay in their head. Like, I have to stay because of this, that, and the other thing. And she also didn't work, which is a big, I know, part of sometimes why people can't leave because, you know, they'd be homeless or whatever reason. And that's so sad. It makes me, I have a friend who works at she's a survivor of domestic abuse, and she works at a domestic abuse like home for women who are escaping domestic abuse. And she has a nonprofit, and the stories that, you know, she shares on the news and from stuff like that just makes me so sad. And I wish I could help. I wish there was something more that I could do for women in situations like that, especially the ones who have kids or who can't leave because of financial reasons. And that's why I'm glad there's books like this too, because maybe they'll read something like this and get inspiration to leave. But, well, I think that was everything I had to say. Anybody else? And we've gone for about 45 minutes, so I think that was a pretty good discussion.
I remember Chloe had said that this is the first book by Heather Demetrios she'd read, and it was my first one too. And it definitely makes me want to read more by her because aside from, you know, how impactful the story was, I just thought it was pretty well written, and she has a good portrayal of a lot of stuff like poverty, home life that you want to escape, and friendships.
I was looking at some of her other books. I think she's only written one other contemporary, and I didn't know this until I saw the cover. It's like I'll Meet You There or something like that. And then I think the other ones just by the cover looked like fantasy, but I'm not 100% sure on that.
Yeah, they're fantasy. I read a little bit of her first fantasy book, and I remember thinking that it was really dense, which makes sense because this book is really dense. So
I probably won't pick up another one of her books for a while, since it took forever.
I've been wanting to read her fantasy series for a while, and I just haven't gotten around to it, you know, because of new releases and hype books and normal booktube problems. But I'm hoping to one day, especially because I like this one so much, like Trina said. Definitely.
Yeah, I'd heard of some of her past books.
Whoa, sorry.
I've heard of some of her past books, but not picked them up yet for whatever reason. But whatever she writes next is definitely going to be like on my radar. I really am curious.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I'm more into the currently released book, so I probably will definitely pick up her next book depending on what it's about.
when you said you wanted to pick up her fantasy series, and you were talking about how like there's so many new books, and I'm just like, not to mention the other day you said you don't read backlisted books.
I very, very, very rarely read backlisted books. Like if I read a fantasy that's older than 3 years old, you're lucky. Older than 2 years old, even, I would say. Like 90% of the books I read are released 2016, 2017, or it's a series that like has a new book out this year, then I'll read the previous books. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's very rare that I'll read backlisted books. It's just, that's my thing. And the awards, I have to stay up on you know, all the new releases.
And then I convince you to read backlisted books because of this.
Yeah, I do sometimes. All right, so I think that really is everything to have to do with this book, at least. If you guys have any more last minute comments or questions or anything like that, definitely let us know in the chat. But for right now, we will do Chloe's favorite part of the live show, which is talking about next month, and then we'll wrap the whole thing up.
I'm like so not into it today. So.
I'll do it if you want to. If you don't want to, I am excited for the first time.
I want to do it's my job.
Okay, all right.
My job.
Every time. All right.
Okay, let me get the calendar up. Where's the calendar? Okay. So what are we in August? The August book of the month is going to be Because You Love to Hate Me, edited by Anne-Marie, anthology by a ton of authors and booktubers. Everybody's heard about this in the booktube community, at least. Normally, live shows are the first Sunday of every month. That's not going to be the case for this book. We are going to be at Disney the day our live show would normally be, and then returning home from BookNet Fest. So our live show is going to be pushed to the second Sunday, which is Sunday, September 10th. And that's basically the middle of the month. And it'll be on Elizabeth's channel, as always, at 6 p.m. And I'm going to send out that tweet now, since I already did that.
And then our special guest for next month, because we have a special guest planned all the way up until January. So hopefully we can keep doing this because I liked it. I really enjoyed your input, Trina. But our special guest next month is going to be Kales from Kales Corner to talk about Because You Love to Hate Me. Next month, I'm really excited about that. Anything else to announce, Chloe?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. So thank you so much, Trina, for joining us. Your input was like, it was obviously like, I knew that there was a lot of booktubers that I was like, okay, I think they'd be really cool doing the live show with me. And I think they'd have really good input. And I kind of just like messaged a bunch of you and I was like, hey, this is what we're reading. Do you want to participate? And this is like the perfect month for you to participate because you had such great input about the.
I was really, really looking forward to this book. Yeah. Like I only just discovered like last year, hey, I can handle and enjoy reading books about this.
Yeah, that's awesome. Did you knew about this book before I introduced it to you that we were going to read it? Oh,
yeah,
okay.
I don't remember how I heard about it. It's probably just like when the cover reveal happened, or maybe it was when the title reveal. Like, you know, by the title, it's fairly obvious what it's about. Yeah. And then as soon as I heard the synopsis, I was like, I want to read it because last year I read The Girl Who Fell by S.M. Parker, and I loved that book so much. It was one of my favorites of last year, which is also pretty similar to this, but that one, the author didn't have experience in it. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's still a very relatable, needed story. But knowing this one, I mean, you know, thank you to Heather Demetrios for, you know, writing part of her story, even though it's not strictly her story.
She definitely did an amazing job with it, and I really loved the book. And again, thank you so much for your input. I really enjoyed having you. I don't remember how I heard about this one either. I think like I was just looking through, like Chloe and I do, we look through all the new releases that are coming out for each month and then this one was coming out and it looked okay. So I was like, why the heck not? But yeah, I think that's everything we have for this live show. I really hope you guys enjoyed it. Like Chloe said, join us next month on September 10th for the live show for
the really exciting one.
Yeah.
Retellings.
And leave the comments below because Trina told us before this video that she might not read this one. So if you guys have read it already, maybe we'll convince Trina to pick it up, maybe. Who knows? All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for coming. Thank you to all the viewers. Thank you again to Trina. Thank you to Chloe, who is always my BFF person who joins me for the Once Upon a Read Along. And we will see you next month. Bye.
Bye.
Is there anything you want to say, Trina, before we go? Maybe? I don't know. Like,
No, I'm good.
Okay, all right. I didn't want to feel like we were just like brushing you to the side or anything. Okay, all right. Thank you guys. Bye.